dramatically. I don't know if, I mean, it certainly has been my experience that it got a lot better, but it has definitely, I think over-evaluating everything to the, to the detriment of where I think we should be the most concerned, which are things that are invasive, disruptive, potentially damaging. I think things that are very simple are potentially overstudied.
When
meaning
you constrain that, don't you constrain my freedom if I choose to do that?
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Don't you constrain my freedom if I choose to make an experiment such as that?
Yes. That's the whole point.
So my question is, who checks the checkers?
Well, our elected officials are supposed to be beholden to people who, like us, we ultimately are supposed to make the decision about whether those officials have the judgment.
How's that working for you?
Well, sometimes it works well and sometimes it doesn't. On the other hand, we're a 225-plus year experience that's still doing okay. These are human systems. There's too much regulation and there's too little.
You ought to cancel a course on risk adverse and get rid of half of the lawyers. Start over.
Well, then I don't know who would have put my kids through school if my wife's a lawyer.
My little experience with getting IRB approval has not been very good. The people who read the request don't really understand it, and they're primarily, I don't know, they're probably, there's an awful lot of protecting the institution. When you write an IRB, you're supposed to protect the individual.
Right.
But I read a lot about, well, if something happens, the legal problems for the institution might be severe. And I think it is a problem. And it's going to slow down. The little bit that I wanted to do, I blast right into, how do I get IRB approval to do more of what I did?
Right. And in contrast, there are nations that have fewer constraints on those types of experimentation and approvals, and either our researchers will go there to do their research, or they will do the research on their own. And
so I have to say, in the stem cell era, I like to say, because I was a public advocate for stem cell research, and I talked about the brain drain, and I have to say it didn't happen in the stem cell world. I think it's not clear that people really do good other countries if they feel they can't do something. They might change their research program, but they won't necessarily move.
Well,
they'll try to circle around and do something else.
Some of the best people in stem cell went to Singapore.
Hardly anybody actually went. I challenge that. Roger Peterson went early on to Sweden. He had a relationship there. There was a big article about it. I don't think that's really happened. I think what does happen is that graduate students see an area that's tainted, and they decided not to go into that field. That's very hard to measure. That's a kind of counterfactual. Let me say this, though. Yes, it's true. IRBs, many of them are bad. What often happens with IRBs, though, is they're poorly run, they're poorly managed. And what I've seen happen is sometimes the scientists who sit on the IRBs or the physicians get more excited about regulation when they get on the IRB than the ethicists are, who have had more, frankly, who have had more experience with the issues and know what's supposed to be regulated and what doesn't need to be regulated. Let me say one last thing about this general problem of democracy and open society. The problem is often not the short term, right? We can get away with stuff in the short term. That the problem is, and I was very involved in the human radiation experiments issue in the 90s, and looking back at it, it's very bad for the country if people can look back at something and feel that people in authority did the wrong thing. And that creates all kinds of problems with respect to respect for authority and confidence in the people who are supposed to be making decisions for us, because for various reasons we can't make them. So I think the long-term consequences of these of ethical lapses can be very severe. Even though I grant you that you do take a chance that somebody else is going to get there first. So yeah, I don't know. There's no perfect solution to this problem. But there is a long-term effect of things that have been done, particularly when they're done to American citizens or unsuspecting innocent people. That undermines confidence in the country.
Howard, and I've talked to one of my neighbors, Jonathan, said, we've just completed, because you're a member of the board of directors here at the Potomac Institute, we've just completed 7 years of NELSI, neural, ethical, legal, social issues studies here at the Potomac Institute. We've had a center that we've been studying it forever. Jonathan's spoken probably 12 times or more
It always seems like that.
Yeah, so we've been pushing the ethical, legal, social issues of neuro to a great extent. And I'm being mean and facetious on purpose, after 7 years of looking at neuroethics, not just ethics, but neurotechnology ethics, I've personally come to the conclusion that the neurotechnology crowd are going to figure out how to enhance themselves and a few others. And those people will leave the rest of the population to worry about ethics. Will they go off to in an enhanced state? So the world is moving on, and we're not going to be able to stop it with our arguing about whether it's ethical.
genetics, the world has moved on.
Exactly.
So there's the question, all of this has to do with the old rule of marketing.
Exactly.
You've got to be there first.
You got to be there first. That's what Dr. Crude was saying at the very beginning. This is going to happen, and you're going to buy it at GNC, or you're going to buy it at Best Buy, and it may come with a UL label, or it may come with built by Apple, but he who gets there first is going to become the next Google, Apple, Microsoft, whatever, and the government's not going to be able to get in the way.
Look, I don't buy it. We got a good friend who's got a pacemaker that is far ahead of the pacemakers you can buy here. He got it in Europe because the regulations are different. Look at the situation of the evolution of nuclear weapons. An expert. We got a prohibition on research into nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
We can't even do research. Other people have fielded whole new generations of nuclear weapons. We still got the old ones.
This is so important. This is nuclear weapons, pacemakers, things that 0.1% of the population really, really need or want is one thing. Something that everybody wants. Governments can't hold this back. Governments haven't held this back. This is proliferated around the entire world, irrespective of what governments have said. In fact, a bunch of people who are the recipients of Arab Spring protests will tell you that these guys tried really hard not to prevent it from happening, and this still made it happen. That's what we're talking about here. This isn't a pacemaker. This is not nuclear technology as in governments want it. This is a nuclear technology as in every single individual. And by the way, I firmly believe, just like Jerry's already showing, neurotechnology is going to be like this. It's going to cost $400.
Yep.
It's going to be available to everybody.
And more than likely,
from China.
more than likely it will come from China.
Ma'am, you've been
Okay.
waiting forever.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Nancy Shinawara. I'm with the National Center for Medical Rehabilitation Research at NIH. So we deal with a lot of grants and contracts involving devices and therapeutic treatments, usually not so much with pharma, only some. And one of the frustrating challenges, I think, for clinical studies and clinical research is that it's very hard to set up a study or support a study for long-term assessment. So there isn't very much long-term assessment on many of the devices and treatments, unless it's in a specific area where numerous labs are doing research in that area. Then it's possible. But in neurotechnology, as you've been saying, the market is driving a lot of the development, and the public is very aware, and people are out there trying these things and very willing to try, at least non-invasive devices. So my question really is for the panelists, if you have any thoughts how to approach this long-term assessment issue in terms of how to develop some kind of framework in which this kind of data can be collected for devices and treatments because for better or for worse, the possible impact of the neurotechnology could be long-term in a very plastic environment where things are changing. And I think we would all have more confidence in a particular approach if we had that kind of information.
Well, this is a data aggregation problem that's not only in neuro,
Yeah.
on oncology and everywhere else. You can think of, I'm not an expert in this, but Ruth Faden and her colleagues at Hopkins are thinking about the clinic as a research site in a systematic way. You might want to talk to them. because they're really interested in how you would create a system to do this.
One of the aspects of brain stimulation is the emergence of literature, where there are papers that come to a certain journal. The journal is called Brain Stimulation, and it's published every other month, and dozens of papers are published, and they have review articles and reviews of meetings, and I can begin to see a community that is sharing ideas and building up this, not by the government, but by this community of researchers. I think somebody mentioned Bixom and Para.
Yeah.
Very good people who are in the beginning to, the field is beginning to come together. I saw something like this happen in lots of fields I've worked in, physics or weapons, or in fact in weapons there was a classified journal that was created where people would come together and publish and share and build up a body of knowledge. I can see that happening in brain stimulation. I think it's a very promising direction, and if it were international and people were beginning to share the protocols and the regulations, then this whole field could move together in a more productive way. So I would encourage that. I would encourage the people who are working together, the community and the journal, the brain stimulation journal.
Well, and I was going to actually say that I want to touch back to the point of the folks who are doing quantified self work. So there's also data to be found, given the open and DIY experimentation nature of it. You could also have individuals contribute to that body of knowledge as well for their own long-term.
That'd be good.
Yeah, I mean that's part of the software.
There was a meeting. There was a brain stimulation meeting put on by, I think, CUNY. Somebody mentioned that.
Yep.
That's very good. And having more of those community meetings and publications, you begin to build up the community and the body of knowledge.
Yeah.
And that would avoid some of the problems we've talked about. It would also accelerate everything. And having conferences like this is not such a bad idea.
In the future, when we're all interfaced through that central computer, well, a conference like this could be very different.
Okay.
Well, we were talking about that. Amy, I think, mentioned something about security.
Yeah.
Boy, talk about hackers getting into that collective. And so how do you build the cybersecurity of the collective?
Yep.
There's actually already a little story about that brings together a lot of these topics: over-regulation or under-regulation, the collective, hacking the collective, the devices that everybody wants. And have you been following this Facebook experiment that was done?
Yep.
I just talked to a journalist about it this morning. So basically, what you know about this? What Facebook did is they changed the comments of some of their friends on Facebook so that they're more negative. Their lives aren't going so well. And they noticed that the responses of hundreds of users whose Facebook pages they manipulated became more negative as well. And if their friends' comments were more positive, their feedback was more positive. Now, that was a social psychological experiment that could have done great damage to some of the people who are isolates. As we know, there are people who spend all day on, like me, except I'm not usually on Facebook, but there are people who just spend all day on Facebook, and their emotional lives revolving on Facebook, and some of them have pathologies that Steve knows more about, than I do. You can imagine that some of those people could well have been damaged by getting communications from their Facebook friends that were sad and inaccurate. So, so this brings together several of the problems: the collective, over-regulation, under-regulation. This should have been this really should have been IRB'd, so to speak, and it would, and actually, it should have been.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Should have been.
It was a social psychological experiment. The fact it was the media, social media, was a red herring. And in fact, this journalist told me what I didn't know, which some professors from universities were involved in some of these. So that's a problem for the institutions that could be caught in this. So I'll stop there.
Let me understand that.
Yeah.
You're concerned that external stimuli change the way individuals behave.
They manipulated, an organization manipulated the stimuli.
Okay.
Isn't that right? Am I wrong about that?
For thousands of years?
I want to make sure.
Kind of.
Yes, but
I'm
not
sure.
systematically.
So my understanding is that they didn't fabricate, they didn't change the content. What they did was just alter the filter of which of their friends' updates were shown on certain people's feeds. So they already have an algorithm for monitoring your, words that you use often. They have positive and negative ones, and they just filtered so you only saw your friends' real comments, but you saw a higher percentage of the ones that positive and negative.
Correct.
Negative or positive.
Right.
Right, because they only
So
show
you
you
would-
300 things, but there are 2,000 to
Right.
choose from, and they chose the most negative things to
You
show.
would and could have seen all of
Clearly a
those
social psychology
anyway.
experience. It's a
Yes.
deception. It's a deception study.
It just proves we're herd animals.
Indeed, there's an epidemiology to negative affect and positive affect. Absolutely. A smile, the world smiles with you.
Right.
Go back and read the book, The Use and Abuse of Statistics.
That's right. Dr. Buss, stand behind. Would you like to conclude? So we can get to there's wine and cheese.
Waiting for us, yeah.
The other epidemiology.
You good? You good?
I'm good.
Okay.
Over to you, ma'am.
Thanks. Well, I wanted to thank our speakers today for coming in. Thank you for your time. You guys had wonderful comments. I was actually really intrigued by everything you had to say, especially to say that, we're not just going to be affected as individuals, but as a society. It's something we've been saying here at the Institute and as part of the Center for Neurotechnology Studies for a while. Can you guys hear me? Am I talking loud enough? But neurotechnology isn't just going to revolutionize the individual and how we interact with ourselves and all the neurofeedback that we're going to have, but it's really going to interact as a full society, and how kind of telepathy is really going to become a real thing with implants that we have in our brains. But the probability of neuro enhancements is really going to change our lives so much that we're seeing it already today in society. So college students are abusing pills to get ahead, and we're seeing marketing brain technologies that, and I can't remember the name of the company now, but it doesn't matter. And the brain zapping devices, right? I mean, all of these companies are popping up, and the cockroach companies, I mean, they're all coming up. But everyone wants to get a leg up and with better efficiency. It's like getting better gas mileage in our cars now. Everybody wants just a little bit better. So you can turn up the dial just a little bit percentage. In the first iteration, you get better efficiency. So we're progressing slowly but surely. But each edition of sleeping better or getting faster with our brains or making better neural connections, thinking new ways, different chemical, mechanical, and biological neuro enhancements. I mean, all of those are different types of neural enhancements. But each enhancement's just 1 or 2% enhanced efficiency. But combined together, they're 8% or 16% efficiency. And so it's just one more percentage on each of those is 50 or 60% total, right? And so we want our students to be the best in the world. We want our economy to be the best in the world. We want our military to be the best in the world. So it starts here at home, and it needs to start now. How many times have you said, if only I had just a few more hours in the day, right? So neuroenhancements are providing us the tools to gain that extra hour that we've always dreamed about having. So what would you do with your extra time? But how do we get there? Right? You're going to sleep. Neuroenhancements are the best investment that we can make in the 21st century. Think about it. So with enhancements, we can do everything better, stronger, and faster. We'll be able to do everything else that we want to invest in better. We can invest in education. Enhancements will help us learn faster. We can invest in our military. So enhancements will help us be more alert and think harder and be stronger soldiers. We can invest in disease research. Enhancement will help us become better, stronger, smarter researchers. Over a year ago, the President announced this BRAIN initiative, and it dedicated $100 million to brain neuroscience research through a variety of agencies and industry organizations. But then just a week ago or 2 weeks ago, NIH released its BRAIN 2025 report documenting 10 years investment of $4.5 billion. But it's insufficient for the amount of research that we have allocated to other national science programs. So the Race to the Moon, the Manhattan Project, and the Nanotechnology Initiative were all $21 billion funding projects. But we didn't just build a rocket with the space race. We combined knowledge from many fields to put a man on the moon. And the National Nanotechnology Initiative isn't focused on individual achievements like 3D printing, electronics, or materials, where it's a collaborative effort of many fields to put nanoscale technology to revolutionize industry and society overall. So if we look back at the Human Genome Project, paled in comparison to the goal with the goal of sequencing the genome, promising personalized medicine. Mild goals were reflected in mild funding of just $3 billion. Even though it did meet its goals sooner with the help of industry, it didn't actually meet the goals of personalized medicine. And 10 years later, we're still waiting for that. So here at the Potomac Institute, we're proposing an expanded brain initiative to a national neurotechnology initiative to expand not just the funding, but to the breadth of topics that would be addressed by the initiative in order to succeed to meet this mission. So the President's Brain Initiative would deliver its promises only if it's met by greater, more robust goals. So the current effort is reminiscent of the Human Genome Project that was promising personalized medicine with the sequence of the human DNA. But the Human Genome Project didn't live up to its expectations, and neither will the Brain Initiative. We need more than the sequence of the genome to cure disease, and we'll need more than the map of the brain to understand how we think. Both of these initiatives have been sold as national science programs like the space race. But these initiatives are akin to building rockets and promising landing a man on the moon. It's not going to happen with just building rockets and to bring a man home. We have to remember that we didn't just get on the moon, but we had to come home too, right? You can't leave a man there. So we need more than just a genome sequence to cure disease, and we need more than just the map of the brain to understand how we think. These initiatives have contained empty promises. It's time to have real promises with the right goals. So we need a national neurotechnology initiative that requires $2 billion in yearly funding. Okay, that's what it's going to take to actually get these goals. And the only way to get these goals of curing diseases that the Brain Initiative actually promises and to understand brain function. So mapping the brain is just one part of this process. We need to supplement what NIH has suggested with funding from other government agencies, with interdisciplinary research, and a national coordinating office to oversee the investments from the other agencies and to synchronize the research efforts. Each agency will always have, as they do, their specific focus, and these focus areas will occasionally overlap, as they should, to create ideal partnerships and collaborative research efforts. The coordinating office should always, as they do, I think, talk to industry to stay abreast of their newest developments and their research projects. Without continued coordination, we'll lose sight of what we cherish most: our health, our minds, and our future. The human brain is the most powerful tool that we know, and we have yet to understand how it works. We should do everything we can to not only understand its capacity, but utilize its worth and enhance its value to ourselves and our species. We can do this by expanding the scope of the Brain Initiative beyond medicine and health to include all of society, including intelligence, commerce, industry, communication, and education. The Brain Initiative as it stands is narrowly focused on medicine and health, and specifically is a research effort to revolutionize our understanding of the human mind and uncover new ways to treat, prevent, and cure brain disorders. Understanding the human brain in all its complexity and how to augment it into even more powerful systems should excite us and motivate us to explore unknown arenas. An investment in enhancement is critical to the goals of the initiative. The science and technology that results from a multi-billion-dollar investment is critical contribution to society. But the true impact is in how a better understanding of our cognition and intelligence further drives innovation. A national neurotechnology initiative is the United States' next moonshot, the next research investment in revolutionary technologies in the last frontier. So I want to thank all of you for coming today to our seminar, and wine and cheese is served.